What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the BizDad Podcast. Today, I am stoked to have a good conversation with Justin Janowski, introduced to me by Eric Cabral. He was on a few episodes ago, so if you could look back about a month or two ago and you could find Eric's conversation. But today, we get to have a phenomenal conversation with Justin. Justin, if you can, please go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us about your family, and tell us about your business.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Adam. I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm a Christian. I'm married to my wife, Kara. We are almost 9 years. We'll be 9 years a month from today as we're recording the podcast of marriage. And we've got two kiddos, Grace and Gavin. Grace is 7. Gavin is 5.5. They're really fun. We're in kind of a fun stage of life where my wife is a teacher. She teaches psychology at the Air Force Academy originally and now at Concordia University. And my kids are in grade school. They're in kindergarten and first grade, and they love playing games and playing sports. And so we have a lot of fun as a family playing games together. And we're in the soccer mom and dad kind of phase of life a little bit, where we're taking them around to the different activities and sports and doing that sort of thing. I love my solo time with my wife as well, though, and we get out on a date night very regularly, almost every single week, and love traveling and things like that. From a business standpoint, I run a company called Faith to Influence. I started in December of 2019, and it was originally a coaching business for Christian entrepreneurial men, working with them on a number of different things, how they were showing up in business as leaders and salespeople, how they were showing up at home as fathers and husbands, and like how to integrate God and faith into all of it. And it was a really fun opening business model, and had a lot of success, a lot more than I was anticipating. I was hoping to earn $60,000 my first year in business, and God had bigger plans. I collected over $250,000 in revenue. And then some of those coaches or some of those Christian entrepreneurs wanted to be coaches. And I remember working with my first coach client, which was David Lee, and teaching him how to build a coaching business, and then watching him go out and have success and express his impact through so many others. And I had a couple of other coaches like that I worked with, and as they started to spread their impact and their success, I realized that's the work I wanted to do. And so now I specifically work with Christian coaches, men and women now, helping them design their offers, their pricing, figure out sales and marketing systems that allow them to have success while also showing up in integrity in the way that they're operating in sales and marketing in the marketplace, a way that honors God and honors their prospects, but creates abundance for them and their families as well. And that's what we're doing now. We run a couple of membership programs. I run what we call Sales School for Coaches. We do an annual summer conference for Christian coaches in Milwaukee, and had 75 coaches here last summer. And I occasionally do VIP coaching days where I spend an entire day, a day and a half with leaders, helping them put all the puzzle pieces together who want to go fast, and then provide some ongoing support beyond the day. That's the bulk of me.
Awesome.
I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We love it here.
There you go. Yeah, and I could hear a little bit of the Wisconsin accent come out. And you mentioned before we started the call that it's nice and chilly. You're finally feeling some winter arrival. So at least you got the hoodie and the beard, right? So, or the jacket and the beard going to keep you nice and warm.
Welcome to the BizDad Podcast, where we dive into the melding of fathership and entrepreneurship with your host, the original BizDad himself, Adam Labar. Adam is a Christian, a former Air Force officer, a dad to 3 amazing kids, a coach, a real estate investor, and a business owner. On this podcast, he'll explore the unique journeys of amazing dads who are striving for greatness in both business and family. So whether you're a dad who is an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply a man striving to be a better dad, get ready as the BizDad brings you conversations to inspire, challenge, and equip you to be a better dad and entrepreneur. And now, here's Adam.
All right, so I want to rewind a little bit because you said you started this business in 2019, right? So I want to rewind a lot, kind of figure out how you got to where you are now, right? So let's take it back a little bit to the beginning. Tell me a little bit about what it was like for you growing up, specifically your dad, kind of who he was to you, and maybe still is to you, and what kind of framework you had growing up for fatherhood.
Yeah. My dad really showed his love through his hard work and his provision more than anything else. Kind of an old school guy. He worked really, really hard my whole life. Still works really hard. My dad was in construction when I was a kid. He had his own business for a while, poured wall basements. They called it Janowski Brothers Construction Company. And it didn't make it long term, but he was doing construction for other companies when he wasn't doing it for himself. And he was the guy who got up really early every day and went to work, whether he was sick or healthy, whether it was hot or cold. And in Wisconsin, there were days that it was freezing cold, and he was getting up and going out and working outside. And then there were days where it was so hot, and I worked one summer with his company doing construction, and like those forms, those silver forms in the sun of summer would like burn your hands. And so then you're wearing gloves, but you're sweating because it gets super hot in Wisconsin in the summer. And he's just the guy who would just show up, and he'd come home from work and take care of the family too. You know, he would cook dinners a lot of the time, and he would do a lot of the cleaning and a lot of the tasks and things around the house. Just a really hard-working, good guy. Some of my memories that stick out to me, he was like my hero. I loved him. I remember my brother Jordan and I had an older brother and sister. They weren't my dad's biological children. My mom was married and got divorced after having my oldest sister and brother before marrying my dad and having my younger brother and I. My dad, though, was always just dad for them. I don't remember them ever calling him anything else. He was always dad. He walked my sister down the aisle, and so I never realized, until later on that we weren't exactly biological brothers and sisters with my older ones. But my younger brother and I, we were very close in age, and I remember we used to ride our bicycles around the big yard. We had 3 acres at one of our homes growing up, and we'd ride our bikes around the yard and pretend to be my dad and my uncle Jason. We pretended that they were motorcycles, and I always wanted to pretend I was my dad. Riding my motorcycle, which he didn't even have one, but he always wanted one, riding the motorcycle around the yard. And he coached our baseball teams growing up, and we loved watching Packers football games, and my brother and I would talk him into at halftime going outside for the 15-minute halftime and playing what we called offense-defense, where Jordan and I would just play football against each other one-on-one. My dad was the all-time quarterback, and so we'd just run out for a route, and the other one would cover. And yeah, a lot of great memories playing sports with my dad and watching sports with my dad, and then just a recognition of how hard of a worker he was, how great of a provider he was.
That is phenomenal to hear. That it's one of those things that's, I never know what I'm going to get when I come on these podcasts. I mean, I've had folks right before I talk to them, they're like, I've got a heck of a story, but I'm going to wait to tell you. And so I don't ask for any background. So I love hearing just coming into this fresh eyes. And it sounds very similar to what I experienced with my dad. I mean, he's worked a lot. He was gone a lot, but when he was there, we were able to play a lot and be able to do things. For us, it was the Patriots, if you can't tell from behind me. Lots of Patriot stuff. I grew up from birth as a Pats fan. And I think we in 1996 we played Green Bay in the Super Bowl, if I remember correctly.
That's
right. We did not win, but you guys did. But that's okay. That's okay. I won't hold that against you for the rest of this conversation at all. I promise I won't. But no, I love hearing that. So I am curious. Did you grow up in a Christian household, right? Because faith is obviously super important to you now. Did you grow up in a Christian household, or is that something found later?
Yeah, I grew up in a Christian household. We went to church regularly. I went to Sunday school. I went to a Lutheran church growing up. My dad is not a great leader of faith exactly. I believe that he believes, and he took us to church, and I think my mom was the primary leader of that effort to make sure we get to church and those sorts of things. And, we certainly prayed and things like that around the dinner table throughout my life. But I don't see my dad as a spiritual leader. He wasn't that person. I think he's a little bit more maybe passive on that front. And I'm grateful that we went to church and Sunday school and I was exposed to God. There was a time when I was 18 to probably 20, 22 years old that I felt like I, out of the house, kind of stepped away from the structure of church and really then refound God and Jesus and my faith in a whole new way that I hadn't experienced before. So my parents believe, and they got us to church occasionally, and they put us in the structures and introduced to the ideas, and all of that I think was really helpful foundationally for me. But I don't see my dad as somebody who has tremendous faith, if I'm being just fully direct about that.
Yeah, and it's did you look at that now that you have kids? Did you look at that and say, okay, well, I need to step up my game in that area? So was there like deliberate conversations that you had with your wife about how you want to work towards that with your kids?
Yeah, we provide probably a greater level of leadership, certainly a greater level of leadership in that area. And one of my goals is to be more of a faith-forward leader. And so I'm praying with my kids, and we're reading the Bible stories, and we're talking about Jesus more regularly in the house. And it's more foundational, and there's more of a leadership desire there. And one of the things I think I appreciate about my dad and my mom was that they introduced us to good things. And then they created like kind of just a structure of support where it felt like they were very supportive of the decisions that we made, or the things that we wanted to try, or the things that we believed in. And I remember when I got into entrepreneurship and sales, I sold Cutco kitchen knives when I was 18 years old. And like I ended up running a district office for them later. And I know from interviewing all the college kids and bringing them in, or the high school seniors, that so many parents like would tell their kids not to do it, and they wouldn't believe in it. And my parents just generally like put us in good positions to succeed and make good choices, but then they generally supported the choices that we made. And I think it gave me confidence in making my own decision. And there's a value in that. I also value like a little bit more structure, a little bit more direct leadership, a little bit more direct conversation. That maybe just wasn't natural for my dad, and maybe wasn't what he received as a model. But for me, for whatever reason, God's kind of prepared me for a little bit more natural step into spiritual leadership inside the home and with my kids.
So it sounds like you've already kind of analyzed this a little bit, maybe analyzed the wrong word, but you've looked back and said, hey, this is what I wish I had, this is what I didn't have, this is where I want to improve. When did you start to actually realize that? Like, when did you kind of start picking up on the things that you wanted to change to adjust, especially for your family?
There was a moment in my mid-20s where I had stepped away from church for a little bit. It was maybe my early to mid-20s. I was probably 23 years old, something in that range, where someone invited me back to church. And I went to church, and I kind of chose God and chose Jesus for the first time on my own. But I also, at the same time, like getting into an entrepreneurial world, direct sales world, selling Cutco. In my late teens, I was introduced to personal development. I was introduced to speakers and conferences and books and ideas that maybe I hadn't been introduced to previously. I remember reading books like Think and Grow Rich and by Napoleon Hill, and just being inspired by the ideas. It started me on a journey of personal development, professional development. I hired a couple of coaches. Hal Elrod was my first coach. I was probably 21 years old when I hired him for 6 months to be my coach. And then later Ben Skemper. And these actually weren't necessarily like Christian influences or Christian leaders, but they were leaders in the idea of personal development and professional development. And it got me thinking from the inside out a little bit more. And these coaching experiences, these books, these conferences, these speakers I saw on stage ultimately like led me to more reflection and inflection and consideration of who I am, what my values are, what's important to me. And, there were so many influences that contributed to that. But I think one of the things that I value a lot is awareness. And so having an awareness of who I am, why I am the way that I am, having an awareness of other people and their personalities and, why they are the way they are. And so that's probably been very interesting to me for the last 15 years.
Okay. What's going on, everybody? I wanted to jump in and take a second to tell you about the awesome team over at Wise VAs. Oftentimes, as entrepreneurs, we can feel a bit overwhelmed with mundane tasks that eat up our valuable time, and it's time to reclaim that schedule, all right? It's time to stop doing some of those $10 an hour jobs and give them back to an elite group of talent that are there specifically to help you and help you stay in your zone of genius. So delegate those $10 an hour tasks to focus on more $1,000 an hour tasks. Reclaim what matters most in your life, which is your time. Get that amazing team of elite remote talent that is there to help support you and make sure that you are giving back the best to your company. So schedule a free strategy call at getwisevas.com/Adam. That is getwisevas.com/Adam. It is an amazing group, an amazing team. They do an awesome job with everything that they've got going on there. If you have some tasks on the side, whether it's administrative, whether it's editing, whether it's recording, whatever it is, they have got an assistant for you, someone who is going to be able to help you out and take some of those tasks off of your plate. I thank Wise VAs every day for helping me process all of these podcasts, helping me take care of a bunch of stuff in the background. And I definitely would recommend them over to you. So again, getwisevas.com/Adam. All right. Thanks a lot. Back to the show.
Yeah, a lot of people don't take the time to kind of analyze that and figure that stuff out. So I'll say that I love anytime I've got a bunch of Cutco knives because I had a friend of mine whose son was selling them, and I was like, yeah, let me listen to this. I was like, boy, this sounds really awesome. So I bought them anyways, not necessarily planning to, but my wife wanted one anyways. But listening to how that sales pitch happened and listening to how obviously trained this kid was on how to do this, I would imagine set you up rather well to allow for good feedback, allow for a good opening, allow for good understanding, to say, hey, this is how I need to be able to change things. Like I could see it already, that path. Is this something that you would recommend to your kids jumping into Cutco or anybody else that's got their kids getting to that age?
100%. It completely and totally changed my life, and is like one of the key moments of my life was making the phone call to get that interview. It was the summer between high school graduation and starting my freshman year of college, and I opened the newspaper. I had to be one of the last people to open the newspaper to look for a job, certainly in my generation. But I flipped open the newspaper and I went to the classified ads and was looking for a job, and it said college students and 2006 high school grads. I graduated in 2006 from high school, and it was an opportunity that looked interesting. It didn't say Cutco. It acted, it was kind of like posed as a marketing position. I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. That sounds cool. The company was called Vector Marketing that sells Cutco, and I went in for this interview, and I remember just being blown away by the product. They did some demonstrations, and they talked about like commissions and how much you could earn if you sold certain products or sets. And I thought, man, I could do that. And for some reason, my mind just immediately opened up to possibility when I heard about this opportunity. I didn't have any doubt or skepticism, which they experience a lot of in direct sales and companies like that. But for me, I just immediately felt excited. And that opportunity working with Cutco and making those sales and setting my own calendar and being paid commission, I learned how to self-motivate. I learned how to set my own calendar. I learned how to deal with rejection. I learned how to be bold and courageous in asking for an appointment, asking for the sale. I learned presentation skills and speaking skills and so many other incredible life lessons. And I developed some of the most amazing friendships of my life while I was there. And it set me on the path to do what I'm doing now. And I'm so grateful I had that experience. Now, I don't think that direct sales and entrepreneurship is for everybody. And certain personality types, depending on how my kids turn out 10 years, 15 years from now, there could be a scenario in which I would say, okay, it doesn't feel like maybe that's necessarily the path that you want to go on. If they want to be doctors or lawyers and they're studious and analytical, like maybe it's not the right thing for them. But for somebody like me, it was absolutely perfect. And I think most people would really benefit from just trying something like that and having the experience of having to put yourself out there and be courageous and overcome fears to self-motivate and ask for the order.
For sure. Yeah. And it's funny. I referred multiple people that are already in sales just so they could learn that sales process that Cutco does, because I thought of how great it was, how they tied it into personal stuff, how they tied it into, like, it just was really, really well done. So I'd send it to, my business partners and be like, hey, you need to check this out. We need to implement some of this with the sales folks. And almost everybody I send it to ends up buying some knives anyways, right? Because they're like, this is just really good and I want to buy knives from this person, and they're great knives. So not that I'm sitting here trying to be a salesman for Cutco, but I definitely still have my knife set that my wife loves. So
it's an incredible product. It's American made. It's been around for 75 years or something now, and they're the absolute best. And they're expensive, but they're guaranteed forever. So if a tip breaks off, or they go dull, or they melt in the dishwasher, you just get new ones for free, or you get them sharpened for free. It is a really cool product.
Yeah, I don't know if it covers accidentally throwing one in the garbage, because I am missing one of my knives that got accidentally thrown in the garbage. We're pretty certain that's what happened to it, anyways. But yeah, it's been like when I was doing the sales thing with the kid. It was like I said, my buddy's son, and he brought on. So my buddy also did Cutco when he was in college, and then he got his son to do it afterwards, and he was like so. He brought my friend's scissors still from when my friend was selling Cutco when he was 18, and he's like, "Watch, it'll still cut this stuff and still do these things." This is my dad's set of scissors. It was a lot of fun to watch. But anyways, enough about Cutco. So what happened between Cutco and then 2019 when you were creating this, right? So you were a 2006 grad from high school, still trying to find your own way in faith, and kind of coming to that in a few years after high school, coming back into it. So talk to me a little bit about those inner years there.
Yeah, when I left Cutco, I had been in that kind of direct sales environment, entrepreneurial environment. I thought, man, maybe I want something more stable. Like it'd be nice to have a salary. And I found a sales job selling packaging, corrugated boxes, all the kinds of things that our stuff comes to us in the mail, and food packaging, other things like that. Actually, it was a customer that I sold Cutco to. Man, I haven't thought about this in a long time. But it was a customer, and so I did my sales presentation for Cutco, and he was really impressed. And he made some point that if I ever was looking for a job, to let him know. And it was probably a year after I sold to him that I reached out, and I had that conversation. I got an interview, and I ended up taking that sales job. It was business to business sales, doing the packaging sales thing. I didn't love it. I didn't love the business to business sales environment. I was so used to business to consumer, which was really relational and fun and just warm. And I found the business to business sales at that point to feel kind of cold and transactional in a different way. And it just wasn't inspiring to me. So I worked there for about a year. And then I got into financial planning, and I worked with Mutual of Omaha. I was a recruiter for them for a while. And then I got into the insurance and investment sales and helping people with their financial kind of setup for retirement and protection of their family. And I worked with Mutual of Omaha for 3.5 years. At some point between the end of my time at Cutco, the packaging sales, the beginning of Mutual of Omaha, the timeline's a little fuzzy for me, but at some point in there, I tried to run a coaching business. I'd had my first experience with a coach, and I thought, man, this was so fun. And I got 2 clients, and one of them paid. And I earned a few $100s, and I was like promptly out of business. As fast as I was open for business, I was out of business. But I didn't really feel like I had failed because it was just a side hustle, and it was almost like quiet quitting before that was cool. I just it happened as if nothing had happened, and then I hired my next coach while I was at Mutual of Omaha, and he was running a business that was, from the client perspective, what he called a mastermind. And so it was not only one-on-one coaching I was receiving and mentorship from him, but there were a group of guys who were in this coaching program, and we got to engage with each other. And I got to be part of a community with other men who were really goal-oriented and wanting to up-level personally and professionally. And that network meant a lot to me. And the business had retreats and experiences where we'd travel and go places together. And I was still a single guy at that time, and I loved building those relationships, and I really learned a lot about myself. And once again, I thought, wow, I want to be a coach. And so I left the financial planning world and decided I was going to launch a coaching business again. This time I was really serious about it. And my brother was living in Colorado Springs. My older brother, he's Army, Special Forces, recently retired a couple of years ago after 20 years of service. Him and his family were stationed in Colorado Springs at the time. He said, if you're going to start this coaching business, you can do this from anywhere. Why don't you come live with us? We've got a spare bedroom while you get started. And I thought that sounded like a fun adventure. And so I did. I went out there and I launched this coaching business. This time I got 4 clients, and I was probably earning $1,200, $1,500 a month, something in that range, a couple months in. And I felt like I was off to a nice start. But I still felt a little bit stuck on how to continue to get new clients. And my coach, he was in Denver, and he said, well, why don't you come work with us? We'll teach you how to run a coaching business. We could use a salesperson, and you could learn. And so I decided to shut my business down again and work with them. And so it was like 2 attempts, two two failures to a certain degree, but I worked with them for 3.5 years, and I learned how to run a business. I learned how to build a system around sales and marketing. Now, interestingly, when I moved to Colorado Springs, my 3-month adventure turned into something different because I met my wife, Kara, and she was teaching psychology at the Air Force Academy, and I was in Colorado Springs. She had just moved back. We both tried online dating. We met through that, believe it or not, and just hit it off. And I knew after the first couple of times meeting her that this was going to be my wife, that she was the person for me. And we got married after a year and a half together. We got engaged, I think, a little over a year together, and then married in about a year and a half. And the company I was working with moved out to San Francisco, and so we did too. And we had a year and a half out in San Francisco, and got to experience amazing food, beautiful nature, and very, very high prices for everything. We went from a 3-bedroom house in Colorado Springs for $1,500 to $1,800 a month to a studio apartment in San Francisco for over $3,000 a month. It's like a dramatic increase in expenses, and we had a good experience out there, learned a lot, came back to Colorado Springs, had our 2 kids, and the company I was working with was amazing in the impact that they were having on people, but they weren't Christian. And like a lot of personal development companies, they were becoming more and more spiritual, but not Christian. And they were talking about God, but not calling him by name. Like they were calling him the universe or source, or they were talking about the Holy Spirit and calling him the weaver, and all kinds of things that were just a little bit off for me. And for a while, I thought God had me there as a light, but ultimately realized that what I needed to do was open my own coaching business and really put God at the forefront of it. And so I made a decision to quit that job and try again. 3rd time's the charm. And it was interesting timing because my wife and I had just had our first baby, Grace, and Kara had left her job to be a stay-at-home mom for Grace's first year because I was finally earning enough at that startup company to provide for the family. And it was my 2nd day back to work after 3 weeks off with Grace that I just felt like God tugged and told me this wasn't the place for me. And I needed to start this business. And I remember I abruptly called my wife because I'm impulsive, I'm an entrepreneur, I have high risk tolerance. I said, I think I need to quit my job and start a business. And she started crying. She just had this baby. She just left her job. She's like, what? We ultimately took a month and thought and prayed about it and talked to some people we trusted and respected. And she came to the same decision I did within that month, that this was what I was supposed to do. And we had like a 3 to 6 month runway. Had enough to give it a shot. And I knew where I was going to go and ask for a job if it didn't work. I wasn't burning my boats. I didn't have that level of confidence, but this 3rd time around, it was dramatically different. Within 2 months, I had over $100,000 in booked revenue, and within that first year, over $250,000 collected, and God just faithfully provided. There was a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety those first couple months, a lot of uncertainty of whether or not it was the right choice, and then God quickly showed that it was. Yeah,
you'd mentioned something earlier that it's second failure, and I'd say that I'm sure you look back at it and maybe change that thought process a little bit, but it's more just one more step down the path to go the right way, right? And I sat down with my pastor one time to try to chat with him about some life decision things, and he and one of my friends both basically said the same things. Like, don't ever look at the success or failure of a thing on whether or not that was actually what God wanted you to do, because what you're doing may be just that thing that you need to learn for that next stage, and then that next stage. So maybe that thing, that second failure that somebody's getting that you got to experience is not a failure. It's the step that you needed to get to into the next place to go, that step is what got me to here, and now I'm seeing where it's at. Not a failure. It brought me to this to help me learn the skills that I needed for that, blah, blah, blah. And it sounds like all of that was well on that path, that perfect trajectory to bring you right where you needed to be, to now be, helping change the lives of a bunch of other folks. So absolutely love that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the truth is, at the time, I've almost done the reverse of what you're talking about. At the time, I never considered it a failure at all. And it did feel like God was just guiding everything. I've more recently, and to me, it was just part of the journey. Like you said, learning. It was exactly where I needed to be, when I needed to be there. Of course, I was so excited because those decisions led me to my wife and my family and all these good things. More recently, for the last few years, I've talked a lot about that first year in business and doing 250 grand and thinking hoping I could do 60 and not sure if I could make it. And I've told that story so many times. And the recognition more recently is like, oh my gosh, I did try twice first and not get that level of results. And so I've recently started sharing it a little bit differently because I want people who are in that phase of feeling like, oh man, it's not working. Or, oh man, I tried and it didn't happen for me, to maybe be able to resonate with the fact that is part of the journey. And using the little bit more extreme failure language, even though that's not how I feel about it at all, is in part to relate to the people who are in the experience right now and maybe feel like, oh, it's not working, or they feel like they're failing, and to recognize that it is part of the journey. And it might be third time's the charm for some other people too, or the second time or the fourth time, and all of it is learning and all of it's preparation for what God has for us. And at some point, if we just stay resilient and do what we're supposed to do, it's going to click in a whole new way. Yeah.
It's cliche, but it's cliche because it's true. It's like failure is, there are two different things that I'm going to throw out here. The failure is an event, not a person. So the person is never a failure. It's like if something happened, but also failure is never a failure if you learn something from it and move forward, right? So I tell my kids all the time, fail forward, fail often, fail forward, right? Because if you're not failing, then you're not trying anything new. You're not trying to do something new and exceed where your previous limits were. You're just doing the same safe thing over and over and over again. Right. And some people don't have the will, desire, or need to chase something a little bit more. But if you're trying to drive forward and you're trying to do something, you're going to have to deal with failure. It's bound to punch you in the face once in a while. So
that's right. One of the things that we teach is God is always fathering you. And so to recognize, like, when something good is happening, to just like praise him for the provision. And when we're experiencing challenge, adversity, pain, etc., just to recognize that he's in that too. He's fathering us in that. Yeah. He's teaching us a lesson. He's developing our character. He's preparing us for something greater. He's helping us have the experience that we need to have to relate to the person in the future who we're going to help. And so, that processing is so important.
For sure, yeah, it's not always easy, but it is important for sure to provide that context to yourself and understand where things may go, and kind of understand that you don't know whether one thing is good or bad until much later down the road. Usually, is when you figure that out. Like I got you were telling your story about meeting your wife and all the things that kind of led up to that, and I sat here and pondered, like, had I not got selected for a deployment to Afghanistan, which I was not expecting, I was told I was going to get a year off, blah, blah, blah. Had I not got selected for said deployment, I would not have been on the dog that I was on that required me to go visit this, go on this temporary assignment where I just happened to meet my future bride. Like, I was supposed to have this time off and not go on another combat deployment, but now, like, here's a different plan for you, because you need to be on this dog to go meet that wife, to go or to go meet that woman who's going to eventually be your wife. So you never know what's going to be laid out there for you. So now, I mean, I want to talk a little bit about your relationship with your wife, just to kind of understand kind of where that's at, right? It sounds like she's also a Christian. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Very good. And was she a Christian when you got together with her? You guys meet each other on like ChristianMingle.com or something? Is that what you said? Online dating?
I don't think it was Christian Mingle, but yes, we were both Christians, and we both knew we were Christians. We were both searching for a Christian partner.
Awesome. Well, I was a prior Air Force guy, so having her teach at the Air Force Academy is, I did not know that before we did this call, even in the intro call. I don't think I remember that happening, but very cool that she was out there. But when you guys met, like, you said you were together for a year before you got engaged, got married at a year and a half. What sort of conversation did you guys have on, like, finances, stability moving forward, kids, all that sort of stuff? How did you guys set the stage for the future, if you set it at all, or did you just kind of go with it?
Well, we certainly set the stage. I was 26 or 27. She was 27 or 28. She's just a year older than me, a year and a couple of weeks. So we were in a phase of life where we were looking for our future spouse, and we wanted to find the right person. We weren't dating for fun. We were dating with a very clear intention and wanting to find the person that we were going to build a life with and have a family with. And we had messaged back and forth on the site that we met on for a little while and got to know each other. And it was mostly just casual, easy conversation there. But when we went on the first date, I remember her coming in, and I could just immediately being excited to see her, and we had this great lunch. We met for lunch, and we had a great conversation, and I liked her a lot right away. I'm like, man, she felt like she had my values, my faith, like we had a lot in common. The conversation just flowed naturally and easily. And at the end of lunch, I picked up the bill, and she was, acting as if, oh, well, do you want me to, contribute to this a little bit? And I said, no, I got this. And she said, well, why don't I take us out for coffee or dessert or something? And she, knew Colorado Springs, and I was new to Colorado Springs. I took her to the one restaurant that I knew that wasn't a chain. I had just moved there. And it was called the Chicken House, by the way. It was Korean barbecue. And it was like the sort of thing where, like, yeah, they'd bring out like we got a couple of big entrees, and then like all the small little bowls and plates with little different things. And it was fun, with family style kind of experience. But she said, okay, well, why don't we go to Poor Richard's? This is a place where you can get ice cream or you can get coffee. You can, we can continue the date, and she'll treat the next thing. And I said, okay, that sounds good. We were having a fun time. I didn't have anything else going on. It was a Saturday. And so we went to the next location. And we had a great time at Poor Richard's. And right next to Poor Richard's, believe it or not, there was a Green Bay Packers bar. And I'm like, I see the flag flying as we're walking into Poor Richard's. And I'm like, are you kidding me? No way. It's a Green Bay Packers bar, literally right next door. And, of course, tell her about my Packer fandom. Probably talked about us beating the Patriots in '97 in the Super Bowl.
Thank you very much for bringing that up again.
Yes.
This conversation may end sooner than expected. So.
That's a core memory, by the way, of my childhood. Core memory. So, of course, after Poor Richard's, we had to pop over to the Packers bar. And so this date started turning into a more, we call it our 8 first dates, because it just like all went from like one location to the next, and we were just having such a good time that we just didn't want the date to end. And at the Packers bar, conversation became like more preparatory, and it wasn't necessarily like something that we were thinking about or planning, but it just started happening. Like we started having conversations about family and kids and the relationship that like we believe in for like the husband and wife role in family and with kids and in marriage and all those things. It just started coming through. Again, it wasn't necessarily first date conversation, but this was our third first date. It felt like, so as the conversation went on, we got more serious in the conversation there, and it was becoming clear like how we felt about finances, how we felt about kids, how we felt about marriage and the husband and wife's role in marriage, and all those things started to come through a little bit in that third stop. Then she was about to meet some friends for a play or something that she was going to, some kind of event. And the Milwaukee Bucks had a basketball playoff game that afternoon. So I was like, well, I'm going to stay downtown. I'm going to like find a spot where I can watch this game. We like went down. And so she's like, well, why don't I just stick with you? Because I don't have enough time to go home. So we went to this next spot, and I started watching the Bucks game. And then she went and met her friends. And then after going out with her friends, she wanted to come see if I was still downtown, still hanging out after, and we hung out a little bit longer, and we went on a walk, and it was an amazing, amazing day. And all that to say, we opened the door to a lot of those conversations that day, and then as we were dating, we had more intentional conversations about all of those kinds of topics. And then ultimately, when we got engaged, we went through a premarital counseling experience with a couple from our church that were just amazing mentors for us, and they intentionally had us have the conversations about finance and kids and parenting and all of the big issues, and we just naturally were on the same page for those kinds of things. And I think that's been a huge reason why our marriage has worked so well.
I greatly second, third, fourth that. It's one of those things that's well, I'm trying to teach my kids already. I mean, they're young. My oldest is 10, almost 11, and I'm still, there's talks about how the purpose of dating is to find your spouse. So the purpose of dating is not to just go out and, see how many dates you can go on and all, be ridiculous about the stuff the way the world wants you to do it. It is to, like, the purpose is to find your wife. So if you're on your first date and you realize this is not going to be the one, well, then don't have a second. Like, be frank and open and be honest that it's not. And then, you go on the second and then the third, and then you're like, okay, this has legs, like this could happen. Then keep asking those questions. And you get to all of that in one day, which is great, right? There's a business guy I listen to. I don't know if you know Patrick Bet David, but he's an Iranian immigrant, awesome guy to listen to for business entrepreneur stuff. He's got the BBD podcast and whatnot. But he talked about how when he knew it was time to, like, find a wife, he's like, I knew that, like, I needed to find a wife, not like go on the 7,000th date already with the 6,000th woman. Like, this is not where I need to be. I need to find a date or find a wife. Where he went on a couple of the dates and had this book that was like 100 questions to ask before you get married type of thing. And he'd give it and say, hey, we're going to go on a second date, but I want this filled out. By the time he's like, I already have it filled out. We'll go over it when we have our second date. Because he was like, if they're not willing to do it, then they're obviously not willing to, like, this is not who I need anyways, right? And he's like, and then my wife came back on the second date, all of them filled out. We had like an 8-hour date that we just went over all 100 of these questions, really figure out who it was, and then we can understand, are we in alignment or not? And it's like, golly, I love that concept of just really knowing knowing what you're looking for, knowing why you're doing it. Did you go, like you said, that you were already at a point where you knew that you were looking for a wife at this point, and she was looking for a husband, but you don't know that obviously when you go on the date that she's looking for a husband, that's just maybe looking for another, fun weekend. But you went to it knowing that. Like, how did you get to that point where you were like, no, like, this is where I know I need to be? And did it align with your coming back to the Christian faith? Like, did those two kind of line up, or how did that kind of work for you?
Yeah, man, there was a moment in my mid-20s. I might have been 25 years old. I listened to a podcast by Andy Stanley, and it was the new rules for love, sex, and dating. And somebody had referred it to me, or I'd just seen it somewhere, and I listened to it. And it talked about, like, pornography. It talked about dating. It talked about sex. It talked about the reality that, like, you're preparing yourself for your future spouse. Mm-hmm. And, like, that when you meet the right person, you're going to have a story to tell about sex, partners, relationships you've already had, pornography, all these different things. Like, it's all going to come to that person. And I think he told a story in the podcast about himself or someone else, a person meeting the right person. Like, they'd been this way, they'd met all these people, they'd had all these different engagements, and then they met the right person at church that they wanted to be with, and this person was, like, pure and ready and, like, looking for a spouse, and they were like, oh my gosh, I finally met the right person. But the guy wasn't the right person for her because of the way that he'd shown up prior to meeting her. Mm-hmm. And it struck me. And it felt so true and so important. And so I made big changes in how I was showing up in dating, how I was showing up in relationships, decisions I was making about my behavior and my action. I started to see myself at 25 as preparing myself and preparing my story for my future wife, and knowing that, like, there were decisions I'd made prior to that I'm not proud of, that weren't the right decision. Mm-hmm. But when I met my wife, I could say, hey, I made the decision to wait for you from that moment on. And I've been preparing myself for you from that moment on. And so I'd been in that kind of couple-year journey as I met Kara. And so I had that better story to tell, and that felt really important. And, it was to the point you're making about dating being to meet your spouse and find your wife. Like, I could tell quickly on a first date when somebody wasn't the person for me. Yeah. Like, it's so obvious. And there are times where you think, oh, maybe this person could be, and they prove not to be, or it just doesn't work for whatever reason. But it felt so clear with Kara, and, like, I had been on a couple of years of preparing myself for her, looking for her. I remember the day after that epic first date, we got back together again. We had dinner, and and we just talked. I met her roommate, and I remember after those 2 days of seeing her and spending time with her, I called my two best friends at the time, and I said, "Hey, I think I've met my wife. I think I met my future wife. Like, this girl was just amazing. She's just perfect." And I had two different responses. My one friend, emotional, like excited, supportive. He's like, "Yes, man. Yes, this sounds great." He's like fired up for me. Totally believed it. Like, "Yes, you found her." And my other friend, very analytical, highly intelligent, different kind of guy. He's like, "Probably not, but I'm glad you had a great time." Because he's the guy who just like, he thinks about the odds. He's like, "Oh, you go on so many first dates, you meet so many people." And that's not everybody's story, but that's oftentimes the story. And only one of them is going to be your wife. And so he cast his uncertainty about it, but he's glad I had a great time. And it proved that she really was. And I want to just share one other story that all of this is making me think about and remember, which is there was a time where my wife and I had been dating maybe 6 months, and she really challenged me. She felt like all we were doing was like eating food together, watching movies, and making out. We weren't having sex before marriage. We were, like I said, I'd prepared myself. She had waited all together, but we were physical and like having that like kind of connection, and we were having like little dates, but we weren't like intentionally working on ourselves and our relationship at the highest of levels. And so she just said, she wishes that we had maybe more intentionality there. And it called me into action. I remember going home and I sat in my driveway in my car for like a couple of hours, and I really thought about how I could show up and lead the relationship more intentionally. And I came up with an acronym for a new kind of date that we could have, and we call it Dates Night, with an S at the end. And the D was for devotion, and that's when we would pray together and just talk to God. And then the A was for affirmation, and that's where we would compliment each other, thank each other, notice all the small things that had been happening over the last week, and just speak love and life into each other. The T was for thoughtfulness, and we might share like our goals and things we want to work on, things that are important to us, things that we're learning. The E was for exercise, entertainment. Could be exercise. Exercise is a better idea. But at the time it was entertainment. We'd like play a game together. It'd be a night that we didn't watch a show, we didn't watch a movie, like we played a game, we went on a walk, we did something fun. And then the S was for stories. We'd read together. So we started actually reading out loud together. Some books, other books we'd read on our own, and then we'd just come back and we'd like talk about them. But we read nonfiction books that really helped us learn and grow, like The Meaning of Marriage. We read Mere Christianity, some other C.S. Lewis books that were just amazing, and created great conversations for us. We ended up over time, like eventually starting to read like fiction books together too. Like we still do this to this day. Like we've read The Hobbit out loud to each other. We read the Harry Potter series out loud to each other. We are right now in the Chronicles of Narnia, and we're on like the 5th book. And our kids will get to read that next. We read the first book to them, but we started like reading out loud to each other and having good discussions, and all of that like made a huge difference. And so we did that as a weekly date, and it really was an expression of me showing up in leadership, receiving the challenge from my girlfriend at the time, who I wanted to be my wife, and creating like real structure that could allow us to have better conversations and have the meaningful, and even like especially the marriage-based books, when you think about having the hard conversations about faith and money and parenting and all those things, reading together created the context and the space for us to have those conversations.
I love that. Definitely wrote that down for sure. Dates, devotion, affirmation, thoughtfulness, entertainment, and stories. I hope that more people hear this and then do that, even with their wife. Like you can do that right now with your wife. It doesn't have to be your pre-marriage this time. Like go do this with your wife. And the connection, I would imagine, is going to be so much better because you're actually doing like thoughtful things instead of, oh, did you see that Facebook video I sent you?
Right.
Like actual things that you're thinking about and encouraging each other. And I love that. You scared me a little bit when you said that it was a podcast by Andy Stanley, because he's kind of gone off a little bit of a deep end recently, but he had some really solid stuff, and it sounded like that one was good. So,
I haven't followed him since, and I I'm not actually a great podcast listener, to be honest.
Okay.
I spend so much time on Zoom with people all day, hearing and sharing ideas that when I'm not on Zoom, I don't want to listen to anybody talk. A lot of the time, I just want to like be really present with my family. So I haven't listened to him or paid a lot of attention to him since. I didn't know who he was before, and I'm not even sure like why I would or wouldn't agree with him or like him now. I just know that specific podcast series landed for me at the perfect time and changed my life. And I would say it probably, from what I remember of it, would probably hold true. The new rules of love, sex, and dating, I would recommend to somebody who's listening to this and saying, oh man, I'm looking for my spouse. I want to be the person that she's going to want to be with, was kind of the idea of it. And it really spoke to like saving yourself for your wife. And it was exactly what I needed at that time.
And I think that's something which I completely agree with. And I think it's something that we need to do a better job as fathers talking to our sons about that.
Right.
And our wives talking to our daughters about that. Right.
Right.
We as husbands need to talk to our sons about that or our daughters about that as well. But from a different perspective on what to look out for, especially in a husband, and what that person should be, what you should be expecting out of that. And I think it's extremely important. And I'll say that the reason that I like some of the things, and this is not an exaggeration, basically Andy Stanley recently said that we just need to stop looking at the Old Testament. Don't worry about that. That's gone. Don't even think about the Old Testament. Let's just focus on this stuff. And it's become a lot more of, there's a lot of churches nowadays that have started to do some really weird things as far as what, what they want to say we should be looking at in the Bible versus what's actually in the Bible. It reminds me a lot of the tickling of ears. Like if your pastor is tickling your ears and making you feel good, then, you're probably not in the right church. So, But that's neither necessarily here nor there. But no, I will agree that on that particular topic, and this is one of those things: chew the meat and spit out the bones. I don't want anybody to hear me say that nothing that Andy Stanley's ever said is good, because I'm positive plenty of great things. I've heard plenty of great things from him before, but just caution folks on that. So. So as you're kind of looking at this, and I want to stay on this topic of talking to our kids about it, right? Your kids are still very young, but what are your ideas, you and your wife? Like, what have you guys gotten together as far as like, how do we want to have these conversations with our kids about what it means to date, what it means to find a good husband or wife, what it means to be looking out for these? Like, have you guys had those intentional conversations already, since you have a couple kids and you're working on growing them and raising them inside of a good Christian home?
Yes, absolutely. What's important to us is just to have every conversation, and have the conversations with the right intentions. I think, there was an absence of those kinds of hard topics and conversations for me when I was growing up, probably because it could feel awkward to somebody who's not had that conversation before. It feels awkward. It feels scary. They don't know what to say, so they don't really say anything at all. Those weren't conversations I had with my dad. But in general, like so many of like the deep, meaningful conversations weren't happening in a lot of households and weren't happening in mine. We're trying to have all of them. We're trying to like really pay attention to the things that are coming up and have the deeper, meaningful conversation and discuss things rather than just sweep them under the rug. And so I remember in my family growing up that we would oftentimes, there was a lot of temper in my family from both parents and from the siblings and all of us. There was just like a lot of like temper in our house and saying like mean things and doing the wrong things. But from the adults too, who you'd expect like greater leadership from. What would happen though is we'd wake up the next day and everybody would just kind of act like it didn't happen, and we would move on. And there was an opportunity through that for me to kind of learn to forgive and forget to a certain degree, because I was just used to, we all love each other the next day, and we move on, we just forgive, we let it go. And there was some goodness in that, but there was a lot of things that could have been done better. And so for me, like if I raise my voice or lose my temper a little bit or get overly frustrated at my kids for something, I come back to them within a few minutes and I'm having a conversation with them. I'm like, hey, I'm sorry that I raised my voice. Here's what was going through my mind and my heart. Here's what I was feeling. I was feeling like I needed to protect your brother, when you did that. Or I felt like I needed to protect your sister, and I didn't like seeing you do that, and here's why. And but there's also a better way for me to respond to that situation in the future. Here's what I'd like to do differently. Here's what I'd like to see you do differently. Does that make sense? And like having those kinds of conversations, or when our kids come home from school and Grace is dealing with grade school girls, and they're already like in the situation where they get in their little fights on the playground. And she's like, yes, this friend was fighting with that friend, and they said, you're not going to be my friend anymore. I don't want to be your friend anymore, and things like that. And like, then we're pausing to not only receive the story, but to also reflect. And like, it's the next day and they're friends again, right? They're not, they don't mean that, but we're pausing to make the point that people, when they're upset and they feel hurt, oftentimes make threats that aren't true or try to lash out and hurt the other person. Yeah. And they say things like, I don't want to be your friend anymore. You're not my friend anymore. But they don't actually mean that. It's not true, because the next day they are friends again. And you've already seen this multiple times. So what's important is to not be the person who's saying, you're not my friend anymore. Just like, in the future, when you're dating, one thing that people sometimes do in an immature dating relationship is they threaten the relationship and they say, we're breaking up, when they don't actually mean it. They don't want to break up. Or people in marriage talk about getting divorced when they're not serious about it and they don't want to get divorced. We should never threaten the relationship unless we're actually serious about breaking up. We shouldn't use that kind of language, and kids shouldn't do it either. But like, these things, of course, are naturally going to happen on the playground. And so we're talking to Grace about it at the dinner table, and we're saying like, it's normal that that's what's happening, but you don't want to be that person. We don't want to say extreme things that we don't mean, that aren't true, just to hurt the other person. What would be better to be like is to respond saying like, that really hurts my feelings that you did that, instead of saying, you're not my friend anymore. But that feels more vulnerable and harder to do. And so that's just an example of a conversation that happened like 2 or 3 days ago. But everything that comes in, we're trying to contextualize it. We're trying to pause in the conversations in the car. We're trying to pause around the dinner table and respond to what's happening, but also the deeper layers of what's happening. And so, even conversations like making sure that we have the conversation with our 7-year-old that like, your body is something that needs to be protected. It needs to be safe. And it's not okay for someone to touch you or to look at your body, or for, kids like at that age, they show each other a private part. I mean, like, things happen. Yeah. And so like, we're not avoiding those things. We're talking about, here are some of the things that have happened for other people, and not trying to scare you or anything, but like, just let us know. Like, if somebody asks to see a part of your body that's private, that's private. Like, you don't show that, but then let us know that they asked. If anyone, like even an adult, even somebody you trusted, like touched you in a private area, I'd want you to tell us that's not okay. And we need to protect that part of your body. And so we're just having those conversations that feel awkward or strange until you get used to having them. And so, of course, as they get older and they move towards the phase of dating and those kinds of things, we're just going to keep having the same deeper level conversations, slowing down enough to talk about the stuff that really matters, explain the whys, answer the questions, and just create an open environment where they can actually come to us and ask and share as well.
Yeah, it's much easier to continue those conversations if you've started them young, and
That's
you get your comfort level up just above where it needs to be, and then you do it another again, and then another one, and then another one, and it just allows for those conversations to happen a lot more fluidly and a lot more comfortably for everybody involed. So
yeah, so that's basically the strategy so far, is just the open conversation.
For sure, and it needs to happen, right? I was the same boat. My parents did not have any of those conversations with me, none. I was one parent never said anything, and the other parent said everything is disgusting and icky and like all the stuff. And it was like, all right, well, I don't know what the heck to do now, because what life is going to throw things at you. So yeah, that's one thing that I'm trying to be as intentional as possible about is having some of those conversations. But I had a question and I just lost it. Dag nabbit.
While you're thinking of it, one other thing that's just coming up is like our kids are noticing our marriage and noticing other kids' parents' situations, and we're having those conversations too. So like, there was a time that Kara and I were having an argument, and the kids don't see us argue very often, because we don't argue very often, but we do have some spirited conversations from time to time. And so they've only seen that a few times, but Grace got scared because she has friends at school whose parents are divorced, and like their friend at school says, yeah, my mom and dad don't like each other. They don't want to be around each other. And so Grace sees us have an argument, and we're not, this is different from my childhood also, like we're not swearing, we're not calling each other names. There's nothing like violent physically or verbally or anything like that. but there's, a raised voice and a different tone and a frustration. And, and she witnessed that, and she got scared. Like, what if mom and dad get divorced? Like, what if mom and dad don't like each other because of this one conversation? And so then we're sitting in that and we're having the real conversation about divorce and marriage and what we believe about marriage, and marriage being something that's for life, and that we're absolutely committed to each other and we love each other, and having these spirited conversations or arguments or disagreements occasionally. That's part of marriage. That's part of life. That's inevitable. That's going to happen. And it's how we communicate to each other when we're upset, when we're frustrated, when we're not on the same page, how we have the conversation rather than avoid it, and how we treat each other beyond the conversation, how we apologize, how we own it, how we get to the same page, how we love each other and forgive each other. And like having the conversation about what a real relationship is like, and the ups and the downs and the challenges and the responses, and what we believe and what God has called us to in marriage. And, just being willing to have those conversations and explain, how divorce is a real thing that happens in the world. And unfortunately, it's more common than we'd like, but it's not in our value system. That's not in our marriage. That's not a possibility for us. And not something that we would ever consider. And like, mom and dad love each other. And when we have these kinds of conversations, ultimately we usually get better because of them, because we learn more about each other and we both own our part of it and all of that. And so, I think that like fighting and arguments and things like that with our spouse in front of our kids, if it's happening too frequently, that's a big problem. Yeah. But if they see a conversation like that occasionally, being able to have the conversation with them and explain what it means and what it was about and why it happened and how we're responding to it, I think that's important, because, my recognition was, wow, she sees one of those arguments after however many months of no arguments that she's seen. If she sees one of those arguments every 6 months and immediately jumps to, oh, maybe what if my parents don't like each other anymore? Yeah. What if this happens? Which is how it is with kids at school too. Like, oh, we're getting one argument, I don't want to be your friend anymore. And so, I think just having those foundational conversations is important. And we go on a date every week, and there was a time when the kids weren't excited to have the babysitter come over, and we'd be walking over from school and saying, hey, I'm taking mom on a date tonight. And they'd be like, oh, no, and be upset. That was a few years ago, like maybe 2-3 years ago. But every single time that happened, I explained how important it is for mom and dad to date, and for mom and dad to take care of their marriage. And like, we never like gave into any of that, because there's a leadership in them seeing, I'm going to date my wife and this is important. And that relationship on its own is so critically important, and it's better for them, for mom and I to care for our relationship. And we had that conversation enough times that eventually, like, they never responded that way again. And now they expect us to go on dates, and they're excited for the babysitter and fine with it. But they see that value, that relational value is really important. And all of it's just giving them an example of what kind of relationship they should be in someday.
I love it. Yeah. And they need to be able to see healthy conflict. They need to be able to see how that's solved, so that it doesn't turn into, the cursing and the throwing of things and people getting angry. And it's like, no, like, you can have healthy disagreements where you're working through problems together, where you're working on these things together. And that's not a problem. Like, right. And you need to know what it means to do that healthily. It's funny when you talk about the date thing. Just yesterday, my son, my 10-year-old, almost 11-year-old, told me, and he said this a few times, but he's like, Daddy, I think you and Mommy need to go on some more dates. Like, you guys need to date more, because he knows how important it is. And I don't know if there's something behind that where he sees like a difference between the two of us when we've had more dates. But like, we just had an overnight date this past weekend. Where they stayed at my parents' house, and my wife and I went and had an overnight date, which was lovely, but it doesn't happen enough. I'm not sure there's ever enough dating of your wife, but but they should see you guys date all the time. But my kids get to see us flirt all the time, and they still talk about how disgusting we are for kissing each other in the kitchen. Or I'll go and smack her butt and then give her a kiss, and then they'll come in and make a game out of it, of like putting their hand between our mouths and try to stop us from kissing. It's like, no, you guys are going to want this very much so one of these days. You're not yet. You're not not there quite yet, but you're going to definitely want this one of these days. And I love that they're able to see that and enjoy that, the fun that it is to make fun of us throughout all of that. So, I want to encourage you to keep that up. And if you guys, my wife and I try to, if we're going to have a disagreement in front of the kids, then it's not going to be about the kids. It's going to be like something else. If there's going to be something about the kids, we need to do that in a different room and then come back out with a unified front of like, no, this is what we're doing. But if it's not about the kids, then we'll have disagreements in front of the kids. And if there's anybody that's going to go too overboard, it's going to be me. And I've had to apologize for that across the board to the kids and my wife. But the kids get to see what that looks like. And like, this is, my goal. I tell them all the time, my goal is to raise better men than me, for my boys, and for my daughter is to raise her to find a better man than me. And the only way to be able to do that is to show what it means to be a good man across the board, right? And I've got it written on my board here: be a good man, not just a nice guy. So we have too many nice guys, and we have too many 40-year-old boys. But if we can raise good, solid men, especially good, solid Christian men, then game on, let's do it. I think that the world needs good, solid Christian men now more than ever. Especially here in America, like where we're like completely neglecting all of that. So I encourage you to keep that up and keep crushing it and be a good representative of what it means to be a solid Christian couple that works hard, that is not flippant with their marriage. It just says, whatever, we can just move on. I can go find another wife. I can go find another husband. That's not, no. There's a guy I listen to, he talks about it. He says, a marriage is a covenant, not a contract. Contracts, you can get lawyers to break them, which is exactly how people look at their marriages. But this is a covenant. This isn't a contract, right? It's way deeper than a contract, which is one of the downfalls of having the government get involved with marriages to begin with, right? Because now all of a sudden it just turned into another government contract that people can break. So because one person found some loophole somewhere that they just don't like, or you're in a state now that's like, we would do no contest, no reason divorces all the time, no big deal, just go file the paperwork, it's over. Baffles my mind. No commitment anymore. But anyways, I went off on a small tangent there, but so I want to talk a little bit more about the business. We've been talking a whole lot about the relationship side of the house, and I loved it. But I want to talk about the business, right? So you got into the coaching side of the house. You've been doing this. You crushed your first year. You're trying to grow this business. So you've been doing this for, I guess, 6 years now, right? You said you started in 2019.
Yeah, it's going to be 20 December of 2018. If I misspoke before. So 2019 was the first full year, but
Gotcha.
This December, a month from now, also will be 7 years. Yeah, 7
Very
years
nice.
in business, wild, and we've had sustained success and built a nice floor. Our business has been between 250 and 450,000 in revenue every year. I'm grateful for that. I'm trying to figure out scale, and we've been working more intentionally about that over the last year and a half or 2 years, trying to figure out online funnels and ads and scaling strategies. I've always built relationally through relationships I had and referrals and speaking and networking and things like that. And that's helped us establish a floor with pretty easy and simple business strategies. But working on scale is a whole nother animal. I'd love to see us scale from being a $400,000 business to 700 and eventually $1 million. And so that's the challenge and the opportunity that we're working on right now.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, growth is growth for growth's sake is one thing, but I mean, obviously, if you're trying to grow and build coaches underneath you and everything, it's not just for growth's sake. So, what is your goal as you're growing this business? Not just numbers wise, but maybe size wise. Are you trying to bring more coaches underneath you to make this much larger? Are you trying to build this network to be a lot bigger? Kind of where are you trying to bring this?
I've currently got a team of 5 people. They're contractors, and one of the things that I think about a lot and provides stress and maybe urgency in a good way is like my team members I know all want to earn more. They're, for the most part, people who wanted to be entrepreneurs and maybe wanted to be coaches and build out their own business, but there were certain aspects of being the entrepreneur, being the coach that were challenging for them. And they've got a specific skill set that they're really great at, while maybe other deficiencies in different areas. And so we've tried to find people who could be specialists in marketing or specialists in sales or specialists in the back office kind of business organizational pieces. And I feel like I've got a great team of people who I really love working with. And I'd like to be able to provide for each of them more. You know, I could settle into a lifestyle business. We don't need to grow the revenue of the business for my family. I could instead take a couple team members off and simplify from a technology standpoint.
Yeah.
And we've got enough for my family and for our tithe and all the things that we want to do that are important, traveling, investing, and things like that with the business that we have. One of the biggest motivators for scale for me is I'd like to build with team. I'd like to have an organization working with others. I'd like to provide for other families at a higher level than we can right now. And so some of the challenging conversations occasionally right now as a growing business, experiencing some growing pains, is investing more to grow and not having an immediate return on the profitability of the investment. And so recognizing that, you know, we're trying to bring on more team, we're trying to invest in ads and all these different things, and we're doing it effectively, but I think I want to grow a little faster. The team wants to grow a little bit faster. I've got people on my team who financially are feeling tight and they're feeling the struggle and they're trying to figure it out, and they've maybe got other side hustles and things that they're doing, but I'd like to be able to provide for them. In my most ideal world, I can provide for a team of 5 to 7 people really fully, where they feel like taken care of and like this can be their primary income source, and it can provide abundance for their family, and it can give back to their community and their church. So that's one of the things that's most meaningful for me and one of the greatest drivers for growth. And, you know, I mentioned that 700K number. I believe if we could get to that, everyone on the team could be provided for in the way I'd like to provide, while continue to provide for my family and provide for the business and have stability in that. And so from like a business and numbers standpoint, I think about those things. And because we tithe the percentage of our income, we've always tithed between 10 and 20%. I know that the more we earn, the more we can give. And it's also an expression of helping so many other entrepreneurs who primarily struggle with the sales side of things, figure that piece out so that they can express their mission and become the person that God created them to become and lead the business or the vision that God's placed on their hearts.
I love it. The team you have now, where is it that you think you have a gap that you need to be able to fill, or what is it that you're trying to push? What levers are you pulling right now to try to adjust the business and grow it?
For us, it's ads and funnels. And so what we're doing right now is we're running a weekly free webinar training. If anybody's listening to this and they happen to be desiring to run a coaching business, we're like giving the playbook on how to build a system around sales and marketing and how to overcome the mindset traps that are stopping people in sales. It's called the Land More Coaching Clients Masterclass, and it can be found at landcoachingclients.com. It's free to join. So we're running a 90-minute training, Land More Coaching Clients, and we are teaching people a ton in that training. And then we're making an offer. We're saying, hey, if you want to take this playbook and do it on your own, great. If you want help with the implementation of building these systems around sales and marketing, you want to develop your skill sets, come join our sales school. Here's how it works. You get this, this, and this. It costs this much. Click here to join if you'd like to be a part of it. And so we have been running this weekly 90-minute webinar every week for 2.5 months. We were running a previous webinar every week for a few months before that didn't seem to be like most appropriately aligned to the structure we thought was going to help us get the greatest results and the greatest impact. And so we've been trying for probably 7 months in total this weekly webinar structure. And we have shifted our offer and our price point of the offer and the bonuses that we're including and the structure of the training to be most productive, most effective for people and prepare people for the next step when it's a fit, and working on turning all the little dials of the webinar. And we now have it clicking at a new level over the last 6 to 7 weeks. We've had people every single week now on the webinar clicking and buying, and then we've had more sales in the follow-up, and all of a sudden it's turning into a little bit of a machine. So now what we're focused on is the early part of the process, which is we're running ads on Facebook and Instagram. And we want our ideal client to see the ad and click it. And then there's the sales page that they see when they click the ad, and how the pictures and videos and the words and everything on that page to get someone to take the next step when it's a fit and sign up for the class. But then a lot of the people who sign up for the class don't actually show up for the class. And that's how people are in real life anyways. But can we optimize our email sequences, our reminders, the thank you page, all the things that happen after they sign up for the class to actually get more people to show up to the class? And so that's what I want to work on, is getting the ads to click at a really high level and be more efficient, and getting our process from sign up to show up to be more efficient, so we can get in front of more people, provide the really valuable training. We've gotten incredible feedback. Even people who don't join our programs love the training, and it changes the trajectory of their business. But then making sure that we get enough volume of the right people there so that we can have a higher percentage of people click and say, I'm in and I'm ready to take the next step. Once all of that is operating at, like, statistically the levels we're looking at, well, then theoretically we can change the spend. You know, right now we're spending $500 or $600 a week on these ads as we're testing, and we're working on all the little pieces, and we're trying to get a little bit better every week. Theoretically, if all the math equations are adding up, which they're pretty close to right now, we can raise the spend. We can spend $1,000 a week or $5,000 a week. Once you know that you can get a profitable return on the spend, we can scale the spend. And so learning how to do all of these things, it's way more complex than maybe people think on the outside until they've seen it all in action. Learning to get all the levers operating at the way that we want has been a much longer process than I thought it would be. And we're very, very close to cracking the code on that, and then raising the spend, and that can equal scale. And of course, once we have more people showing up to the webinar, signing up for the webinar, whether they come or not, they're going to receive our weekly email with our podcast. They're going to receive our sales newsletter. They're going to receive the invitation to come to our summer conference. And we'll have more people joining in other ways as more people sign up for this class, and as more people join from this class. And there's the referrals of the people who come that we weren't introduced to previously. And so there's a snowballing effect to scale, and it feels like we're close to cracking the code on that.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, it's such a process. I've gone through all of that with previous businesses, and it's a long, arduous thing to go through all of that and find the right webinar, and like what story fits best and what things go best over here. And you know, sometimes when you're doing it, you feel like you're if you're looking at it incorrectly, ruin the punchline up front. You could feel like you're just trying to trick your clients, but no, you're trying to, like, if you're believing in what you're doing, and I believe in what you're doing, if you're believing in what you're doing, then you're not at all. You're trying your hardest to make sure that people have the tools they need to be able to succeed in what they're trying to do. And that's change their life and other people's lives, everybody they come in contact with. And so we need to be able to narrow this in, dial it in, and make sure that all of this stuff is done correctly, and all of those little marketing things are hitting, and all of those little follow-ups, and you've got the right UTMs on all the different things so that you know what's happening in different things. And it just, man, oh man, there's so many dials back there to go through. So as you've been kind of working at it, I think you at least implied, and I may have made a jump, but it sounds like you have one of those 5 contractors is a marketing specific person. Is that right?
Yeah, two are really in that marketing funnel ad kind of space. They're working together on that project. 2 people are helping us with the sales on the back end. And then I've got 1 business manager who's my executive assistant and supporting with my email. And then she's also helping with my calendar. She does client onboarding, offboarding, tracks finances, does a lot of cool stuff for us to make things easier. And so, yeah, I'm not the funnel guy. I'm not the ads guy. And I'm not trying to be that person. I'm not trying to be everything to my business. I like talking, teaching, training, selling, coaching. You know, those are the things I'm best at, is being with the people. Tasks just weigh me down. And so the challenge in not owning it is I don't see all aspects of it. You know, I've got a working knowledge, but as far as timeline and strategy and things like that, I'm trusting others. And I think I've got the right people in place for that. And you're right, like the webinar and all of this strategy, it's not designed to trick anybody, but the language that we always use is I just want to make it as easy as possible for the right people to say yes. And oftentimes, if we don't have things designed well, the right person who God wants us to help isn't going to find us, or they aren't going to show up to the event. And if we could have done something to help that person show up to the training that they actually need to fulfill their vision, that God's placed on their heart or for their business, man, it's such an important opportunity. And if our program is the one that's going to help them break through and overcome their fear and have success and have the impact that they want to have to their clients and tithe more to their church and provide more to their family, I want those people to say yes. If it's not a fit, I don't want them to say yes. And in fact, in our marketing course, working with Christian coaches specifically, a lot of people are going to see what we're doing and say, oh, that's not for me, which is perfect. Because we want as many people as possible saying, oh, that's not for me. That means we have a very clear niche of people who are going to say, oh my gosh, this was made for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Completely agreed. And what's the term? There's riches in the niches, right? Like you need to find who your actual avatar is. And too many people, my avatar is 20 to 75-year-old people that like that grocery shop. Okay, what? Like, how is that possibly an avatar? That's not an avatar at all. That's the world. Like, come on, you got to narrow this in. I love that you're doing that. Now, you did, I'm going to maybe step on your toes a little bit and try to pull some things apart. Now, you mentioned you've got, the tasks and everything, not really your thing. You don't really like that kind of drags you down. There was a guy I listened to, I don't remember where it came from, but they were talking about how they talked to Mark Cuban and said, hey, like, you have all of these businesses, you buy all these businesses on Shark Tank, you're partnering with all these people. How do you possibly track all of that stuff? And he says that he is ridiculously micromanaging at the beginning to know that the person that's in charge of that business knows what they're doing. And then once he knows, so they've micromanaged enough, he sees all of the details, everything they're doing, he knows that they're doing the right thing, he gets the heck out of their way and does it. Lets them do it. And then just has those key metrics that he needs to make sure are going on. Like in EOS, they call them their scorecard. Like what's going on in your scorecard to know what's actually happening. So are you intimately understanding of what the people are doing, that you know all of those details that they are doing, but you just like now you've trusted them to be able to step aside? Or are there still things that they're doing you just don't really know about?
It's a little bit of both. I definitely don't have the micromanaging personality. In the most ideal world, speaking of EOS and the scorecard and the L10 meetings and all of that, in the most ideal world, I'd be the visionary and have an integrator who is the micromanager at the beginning and understands how all the pieces work and manages the team. It's not the most natural skill set for me. I'm a great solopreneur, entrepreneur, much better at that than I am as a manager. And so it's trying to find the right people with the right integrity and trusting them. For me, that works. But we are using the EOS system. We are running the L10 meetings, which is like a level 10 meeting, and it has a very nice structure to it. We learned this from Aaron Havivian, who's great at operations. If anyone needs like operations support for a bigger business, Aaron and his team at the Collab team, like they step in and like provide operations for other businesses. They supported us with that for a period of time, taught us how to run these kinds of meetings and how to create the right scorecard. So now every single week we're looking at the scorecard of numbers, which tells a lot of the story. Mm-hmm. And that's been very, very helpful as an implementation for us. But how all the pieces work, I don't know how all of them work. There are certain parts I know. With my sales team, I know all the pieces. With my operations, like client onboarding, offboarding, client manager, all of that, I know all the pieces. With general marketing, I know all the pieces. But with the more complex funnel ads things, like they share with me and they kind of inform me and teach me and help me understand more. But it's such, there's so much depth and nuance to that kind of work that I definitely don't know it all. And I'm trusting them, and they're invested in coaches who are teaching them what to do. And it would be helpful if I had a greater knowledge base and or was a better manager. But those are not my skill sets.
Totally understand. And it's one of those that, when you're building a business, you have to be all of those things. When you've grown a business and then you can afford to hire all those things in, then great. Like that makes it a whole lot easier. But man, oh man, sometimes you have to trust but verify and see what the heck is going on,
Right.
And that's kind of where it sounds like you're in at the moment as you're trying to grow this out. Mm-hmm. So if you were to have your perfect world, it sounds like you would have somewhere around 7 people working for you, somewhere a little, $1 million or a little bit more in revenue. The ads working well. You have great ROAS on all your stuff. Everything's looking kind of copacetic, and then you just get to coach and love on the people and make sure that everybody's feeling good. Does that sound right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in the most ideal world, I would lead trainings and group call. I love group training. Like I love leading my sales school call. I actually really enjoy doing the webinar training. We do a prayer and networking call every single week as well for our membership community. And that's really special and fun for me. I like leading that group call, and I like engaging with higher level relationships one-on-one occasionally. But in my most ideal world, I'm leading a handful of group meetings each week and bringing my very best. And beyond that, I'm not tied down to a whole lot of responsibility. I can focus on building relationships rather than getting down to the nitty gritty of the tasks and the day-to-day operations.
Yeah, for sure. Totally understand that. That was me. I mean, I was the COO for a company for a little while, my education company I was a part of, and it was not like, I mean, it was great when there were problems and I was able to fix them and solve them and go work through things. And like, I love being able to solve problems, fix issues, hire and fire the right people, make sure things are going in the right spot. But then once day-to-day operations were going, like, I can't do that. I love being able to sit down and talk with people and be able to do different things and, fix problems and help people solve their problems. But man, oh man, day-to-day operations are not my thing. So it sounds like similar with you. Find a good operator who can take care of those things. So what are you hoping to work towards to get to that? What is your when is your timeline for trying to hire somebody to fill that role for you?
It really comes down to the growth of revenue right now. Now, at some point, I could, I suppose, decide to make the investment before the growth, and just trust that the growth is going to come. But there's an up level that we need to experience. There's a transformation into scale that we need to experience for that to feel like an easier hire. And so if we jump from being a $400,000 business to being a $600,000 business, it becomes a lot easier for me to hire that person. I've got a couple people I've got my eye on who I think could be a fit for that role when we're ready for them. I believe that the current team is capable enough for us to experience that leap. And I genuinely believe that we're close and that there's going to be a big breakthrough at some point in the next 12 months. And after that, it would be so nice to hire an integrator operator who could come in and manage the team and lead so much of the inner workings of the business, so I could be removed and freed up from some of that. That would be a dream come true. And I hope and I'm believing that we're close.
So I was chatting with somebody once trying to help him do something similar, and I said, why don't you take, like, let's do a 6-month project, right? Take 6 months of a salary and have it aside. That's your investment pocket, and say, hey, when you're hiring this person, you're telling them, hey, you've got 6 months to prove that you're going to make more money than I pay you, right? Yeah. And I'm going to set this aside. But after 3 months, after 1 month, we're going to have a conversation. After 3 months, we're going to have a conversation. After 6 months, we're going to have a conversation. You'll probably know by the end of 3 months whether or not this person's going to make the difference in that by that 6 months. But set the money aside and say, hey, this is the coffer, because it is one of those things where it's hard to. When you are growing, it's like, man, like, am I at my limits on the things that I'm able to do to make this grow? I need to bring somebody in. Okay, well, maybe we do need to make the investment beforehand, because if you could just take, let's say, I'm just going to make round numbers to make life easy. $50,000, you put it aside and say, okay, this is for 6 months of that person's salary. And then at the end of those 6 months, if they've proven to me that they can make this company an extra $200,000 in a year, done. Like, we're going to keep you around and make it happen. If they've shown that if I pay them $100,000 a year, they're only going to make me 75. Also done. Like, only the other direction. We're not going to keep you around. So it might be worth taking that time and taking that risk and saying, hey, I'm going to take $50,000 aside, or whatever the number is, insert X number here, to say, hey, this is going to be that person's salary for 6 months, and I'm going to see what it is that they can do. And then after 3 months, if you realize that it's not going to happen, then be done. Like, don't wait for the whole 6, but just have that set aside to be money that goes back into the business in a different way, and see if that makes a big difference for you. But
I love that idea.
Just an idea.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. And that way you can test it out, see what that person's like. You don't have to make the commitment of I'm bringing on this hire. Like, be open and honest with the person up front. Like, hey, like, we're not positive this is where we need to be, and I'm not positive, where it's going to be. So this is going to be a 6-month trial period. Prove to me in 6 months that this is what you can do, and we'll make it happen. And that way you can see them work and make it happen. So without feeling like you're bringing on a new employee that you have to make sure you're providing, care and feeding for. It's like, no, like, hey, I've got this money set aside. It's allocated just for you. Let's make it work. So
that's right.
But all right, so I've loved this conversation. I thank you so much, Justin, for jumping on and joining in. Do you have anything that you wanted to discuss that we haven't hit on yet, or anything that you wanted to go back to chat about more? Anything that you want to drop in here for the audience or for each other?
This has felt really good. I've really enjoyed the conversation as well. I love the topics that we were able to hit on and some of the things you were able to help me remember. As you ask good questions and just created a lot of space to share. This has been one of my favorite podcast interviews. Thank you so much. I don't feel incomplete, like there's something that's been missed or hasn't been fully shared or discussed. I'm open-minded if there's anything else you want to wrap up with, but I feel really good about the conversation we've had already.
Great to hear. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I love this. Like, it's one of the reasons I still do this podcast is because I just love having these conversations and being able to pull things apart and hopefully ask questions that people haven't been asked before, and encourage some thoughtfulness. So I guess the last thing for sure would be Justin. Let everybody know where they could find you if they want to hear more, if they want to chat with you one-on-one or whatever. What's the best way for folks to be able to get a hold of you?
Yeah, easy to find me on social media, specifically Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Justin Janowski. And Faith to Influence has a number 2 in the middle of it, Faith to Influence. So you can find me online and send me a direct message. I'm happy to respond to you there. And if they're, somebody's listening and they're interested in building a coaching business, go to the Sales Strategies for Christian Coaches podcast for great free trainings there.
Absolutely love it. Well, Justin, again, it was an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I really appreciate you jumping on and sharing your thoughts and wisdom with the group. I'm looking forward to hopefully hearing that you've brought somebody in and you're growing the business and it's doing really, really, really well and it's growing and you're hitting 7 figures. And I look forward to maybe podcast number 2 where we get to talk about how all that growth happened. But
sounds great.
For everybody listening, if there's anything Justin could do for you, please reach out to him. I love being able to network and connect with other Christian entrepreneurs who are trying to grow and build and bring Christ-centered business to wherever they're at. So if we can have more Christ-centered coaches out there and getting rid of that term, the universe and all the nonsense, God is there. He's real. He's the center of all of this. Let's focus on that as we continue to grow and build. So thank you, Justin. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And please like, subscribe, comment below, and we will see everybody on the next show.
Thank you so much for listening to the BizDad Podcast. We hope you found some value in your time here with us, and we look forward to bringing you the next episode. If you've enjoyed today's show, please subscribe and share so you and your friends won't miss our upcoming episodes. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Rumble, where we continue these discussions and share more valuable content. Be the dad you know you need to be and run your business in a way you're proud to share with your kids. Keep crushing it.